This patch is almost entirely centered around champion changes, as we've got one adjustment to Baron and then 14 different champions receiving adjustments. So let's break it all down and provide you guys with an update to the solo queue tier list for every single role as we head into patch 25.15. And let's be honest, picking the best champions is fun, but is that really enough on its own? I don't know about you, but locking in Warwick just because he's OP tier doesn't really help if you're lacking knowledge on how to jungle efficiently. However, you can begin stomping your way out of low elo by utilizing our extensive catalog of jungle courses that are going to teach you everything you need to know to succeed as a jungler, which will have you speedrunning any game below Diamond in no time. And that's just for jungle. Your mid lane OP tier Diana pick becomes actually unstoppable when you know all the essentials in mid lane, thanks to the new 6-part mid lane series over on our platform that our top 10 challenger player Strumpus has tirelessly worked on exclusive to our members. Our tier list gets you the right champions, SkillCapped gets you the right skills. And we're so confident it works, if you don't climb 5 divisions while actively using the platform, you literally don't pay a single cent. So why hold yourself back this season and finally get the rank you deserve? And with that being said, let's get into it. So starting things off by looking at the change to Baron, it will no longer have any health regen at all. In previous patches, Baron would regen 15 health every 5 seconds, and this actually caused for some pretty tragic smite misses in the past. So from now on, you won't have to worry about any regen, and instead, Baron will just be receiving an extra 100 health to compensate. Kled ended up landing a bit weaker than Riot had intended after his 25.14 adjustments, so they are issuing a buff to his passive for this patch, with the dismounted resistances going up. We can see here in the comparison clips that on Titanic Hydra completion, this will equate to an additional 4 resists per nearby enemy champion. So not a buff that should propel Kled into an OP spot or anything, but he'll be a very solid A tier pickup for 25.15. Riven is being issued a bug fix change for this patch, as her Q knockback distance was not consistent in 25.14, so that's being fixed now. With bug fix changes, it's really hard to predict how much they will impact a champion's power, so for now, we're going to be placing Riven in the top lane A tier, as the nerf from last patch actually hit her a bit harder than we were expecting. If this bug fix does turn out to be overly impactful, then we could move Riven back up for mid-patch. Irelia saw a surge in power over the past patch due to the Blade of the Ruined King buff, so Riot will be directly nerfing her for 25.15. It's health regen that is being targeted, dropping from 6 to 3.5 per 5 seconds, which equates to a loss of 30 health over 1 minute. This nerf will likely be very close as to whether or not it bumps Irelia out of the S tier. Early game power has definitely hit a decent amount by this nerf, and because the early levels are pretty important for Irelia to get the ball rolling, we're going to go ahead and bump Irelia down into A tier. Quinn is going to have her Q changed in a bit of a confusing way for this patch, as the base damage is going up. However, the total AD ratio is being swapped for a bonus AD ratio. So to make things less confusing, let's take a look at the comparison clips and see what we can find. So a Quinn at level 3 with the Doran's Blade was dealing 66 damage per Q in 25.14. In 25.15, Quinn is going to be dishing out 4 damage less than before, coming in at 62. What about when you're on your first item spike? Well, a Quinn who has her static Shiv completed and is level 8 was dealing 113 damage per Q in 25.14. Jump ahead to 25.15 and Q is coming in lower once again at 108 damage. And then for one more test, let's check out level 13 with 2 items, because this is in theory where the bonus AD ratio would start to kick in. The damage is still a bit lower in 25.15, coming in just 2 less than before, but it's still a nerf overall. So even with base damage on Quinn's Q going up, because the ratio was changed from a total AD ratio to a bonus AD ratio, it turns out that her Q is just weaker for the most significant parts of the game. It's not like she lost a ton of damage though, it's only 4 less at level 3 and then 5 less at level 8, so this nerf really shouldn't affect Quinn's power much at all. As a result, we're going to be leaving Quinn up in the top lane S tier for the time being. Illaoi is going to receive some pretty massive adjustments for this patch, as her E vessel duration is going from 10 to 3 seconds. If you guys are unfamiliar with Illaoi, basically what this means is that now once you land your E on an enemy, they will only be marked for 3 seconds. In previous patches, you'd be marked for 10 seconds and have to try and dodge tentacles spawning around you for that entire duration. But now that it's only 3 seconds, you'll be able to get back in action sooner. Now, isn't this just a nerf to Illaoi though? Yes, but there are a few buffs being issued to compensate. Now, when a tentacle spawns, its attack lockout will no longer be 1.1 seconds and instead sit at 0. So you know how when you're hit with an Illaoi E and a tentacle then spawns around you and you can pretty easily dodge it as long as you're paying attention? Well, now dodging that tentacle that spawns will be much more difficult due to this buff. Illaoi's E Spirit and Vessel tentacle attack cooldown is getting a buff, going from 5 scaling to 3 seconds to 4 scaling to 3 seconds. And then passive gets a very minor buff with AD ratio going up from 100 to 105%. So even though Vessel duration is down from 10 to 3 seconds, if that attack lockout buff actually means you will be able to hit enemies with tentacles as they are trying to run away from you, it could actually lead to more DPS overall for Illaoi. In lane, we are a bit worried about the 10 to 3 second drop though, because it will make ranged matchups much more difficult. Landing E on a ranged champ and forcing them to dodge around for 10 seconds gave you a bit of breathing room, but now at just 3 seconds, the enemy will be able to go back to posturing aggressively much sooner. We'll have to see just how impactful these adjustments land when they hit live servers, as it's a toss-up as to whether they land positively or negatively. Illaoi has been one of the lower win rate top lane champs for a while now, so it would be kind of weird for Riot to issue changes that end up nerfing the champ, but it is Riot, so who knows. For now, we're going to hold off on pushing Illaoi up the tier list, but we'll have an update for mid-patch if the changes sway significantly one way or the other. So if we have a look at the top lane tier list, one massive shocker going into 25.15 is the fact that Warwick was not nerfed in any way, shape, or form. After the Blade of the Ruined King buffs, Warwick has shot up to holding the highest win rate as a top laner and a jungler, so if you are someone who can play both roles, just spamming Warwick for 25.15 is going to be highly profitable. The top lane meta is honestly pretty balanced right now for solo queue, as besides Warwick, many of the commonly played fighters are around the same power level now. We saw Darius and Garen both buff last patch, so they are solid pickups once again. Set got nerfed, so he's no longer as egregious as before, and then Jax was also buffed a few patches ago and is back in an A tier spot. The only top laner who continues to struggle more significantly for solo queue is Rumble. Rumble has just been nerfed so many times this season due to his presence in pro play, and he suffered in solo queue as a result, so he's one of the few C tier top laners that is still being played in over 1% of games. We were correct in our assessment that Bel'Veth would turn into an S tier jungler due to the Kraken Slayer nerfs last patch, so Riot's going right ahead and directly nerfing her in 25.15. Q damage will be dropping with the base value going from 10 scaling to 30 to 0 scaling to 20. Now keep in mind that you do have multiple charges of Q, so even though a 10 damage loss in a vacuum doesn't seem that bad, it's a potential max loss of 40 if you land all your Qs and then get to reset one of them from proccing W. Passive is getting buffed in a very minor way, with the attack speed going up from 0.28 scaling to 1% to 0.28 scaling to 1.1%. So all in all, net nerfs to Bel'Veth for 25.15, and we do think they will be somewhat significant, so we'll be dropping her from S into A tier. Master Yi was another champion who greatly benefited from the 25.14 item changes, so Riot is slapping him with a direct nerf for 25.15. Q base damage will be dropping from 30 scaling to 150 to 20 scaling to 100. However, the total AD ratio is up from 50 to 70%. Looking at the comparison clips here, on Blade of the Ruined King's spike, we can see that the change equates to a 16 loss in damage on Yi's Q. And then monster damage is going down as well, with the base dropping and total AD ratio being increased. We see these nerfs going in the same direction as the Bel'Veth changes, with Yi losing just enough power to warrant a push out of the S tier, so we'll be dropping him into A. Pantheon has been a very popular jungler in both pro and solo queue lately, so he's getting a nerf to his clear speed, with Q monster damage dropping from 105 to 90%. Pantheon has been super close to S tier in recent patches, so even with this nerf going through, we don't think it will be enough to drop him out of A, so we'll be keeping him there for now. Rek'Sai is going to receive a bit of a mini rework for 25.15, so let's break it all down. There's two base stat changes, with her base armor going down and her armor growth dropping as well. W knockup lockout duration is being lowered from 10 flat to 10 scaling to 6 seconds. So what this means is that when you knock up an enemy with your W, you won't have to wait as long to use your knockup on them again. In theory, this looks like a really great buff, but when you consider that you don't max your W out until last on Rek'Sai, it's only a buff level 14 onwards. So late game Rek'Sai does become a bit more competitive now, which is actually pretty nice considering late game team fighting has always been a weakness of the champ. So this buff helps that out a bit. Empowered E damage is being altered so that the max health ratio is gone and the total AD ratio is gone as well, and instead we'll now have a flat damage value and deal 80% bonus AD true damage. So what does this actually mean then? Well, on your one item spike of Stridebreaker, Empowered E will be dealing 182 damage as opposed to 179 from last patch, so pretty minor buff overall. E unempowered damage is being changed too, and if we look at the difference in damage, 25.14 was dealing 75, and in 25.15 it will be dealing 86. E cooldown is buffed in a huge way, as it's dropping from 10 to 6 seconds, and then R is being changed so that instead of being an execute and dealing missing health damage, it's now going to deal max health damage, so better for against bruisers or tank targets. As we can see here, just using Rek'Sai R on a target with full health only dealt 122 damage in 25.14, and it will now deal 274 damage in 25.15. So just using your R as a gap close to get onto a target will be much more rewarding now. In the past, because Rek'Sai's R dealt missing health damage, you'd kind of feel bad for using it as a gap close because it would deal next to nothing damage-wise if the enemy was on full health, but now you won't have to worry about that at all, which is super nice. If you're someone who likes the assassin style of Rek'Sai and builds for lethality, then this is probably more of a nerf to R, but Bruiser Rek'Sai should be in a much better spot with this R damage change. R cooldown is going up by 20 seconds at rank 1 and 10 seconds at rank 2, but will stay the same at max rank. R cooldown on targets who die mid-cast is dropping from 10 to 5 seconds, and then R is now going to reset W cooldown on cast. So overall, these are looking like net positive changes for Rek'Sai. The later game skirmish power of Rek'Sai will be a lot better with E cooldown dropping and W knock-up lockout duration going down a ton. We're optimistic that Rek'Sai should land in a pretty good spot for 25.15, so we'll be placing her in the jungle S tier. So if we have a look at the jungle tier list, OP tier is going to stay the same as last patch, with Jarvan, Trundle, and Warwick leading the way. Rek'Sai is going to be the one to watch for this patch, as we're expecting her to be a much more well-rounded champ overall. Jungle meta is definitely a bit one-sided towards AD fighters at the moment, as all of the OP tier picks are AD fighters, and then we've also got Briar, Nocturne, and Volibear as really great picks, but I guess Volley would be considered as more of a hybrid bruiser because of his meta build of Cosmic Drive into Flicker Blades. In terms of AP junglers, Diana and Echo are both quite good at the moment, so if you want to have a physical damage and magic damage champ in your pool right now, then either of them is great for that magic damage pick. Mid lane usually isn't a role that Riot completely avoids during a patch, but this is one of those rare exceptions where the role received no changes for 25.15. So the tier list won't be any different than where we had it for last patch, with Diana in the OP tier along with a ton of really good S tier champions to choose from. One adjustment we are making relative to last patch is bumping Twisted Fate from S into A tier. Consecutive nerfs have ended up hurting a bit more than we expected, so he's getting a push down for this patch. Other than that, nothing of significance to report, so let's move right on to ADC. Neela is going to be issued 2 changes for this patch, one to her attack speed growth, which is dropping from 3 to 2.25%, and then base AD is going up from 58 to 60. So Riot does have these listed under the nerf category in the patch notes. However, we really don't see them reducing the power of Neela by all that much. After all, Neela has been the highest win rate ADC for a while now, so despite these changes, we'll be keeping her in the S tier. Riot has a couple of changes lined up for Corki, with his Q base damage going down at the later ranks. However, bonus AD ratio is up from 120 to 130%. So what does this mean then at different stages of the game? Well, if we look at damage comparison on Trinity Force completion, we can see that Q was dealing 247 damage in 25.14 and will now be dealing 234 damage in 25.15. What about once you have your Mirror Mana stacked though? It's still a nerf, but to less of an extent, with Q dealing 351 damage in 25.14 and now dealing 345 damage in 25.15. R is being changed as well, with bonus AD ratio going up from 80 to 85%, so very minor. Overall, we are looking at these adjustments to land as net nerfs to Corki. The champ has already been pretty average for solo queue for the past while, so this has to be a pro play triggered nerf here. We are expecting for Corki to be one of the weakest ADCs in the game now, as we're dropping him from B into C tier. So we've got a couple of adjustments to discuss for the ADC tier list in 25.15, as we're shuffling a few champions around. Draven and Jhin are being moved into the B tier, and here's why. Over the past couple of patches, we've seen so many ADCs become either directly or indirectly stronger. Ashe, Kai'Sa, Sivir, Vayne, Kog'Maw, Smolder, Aphelios, Samira, and Senna have all seen an increase in power over the past couple of patches, and it's just led to the likes of Draven and Jhin falling down in relative power. For an update on Ynnara, ever since her release, her win rate continues to climb day after day and is looking like a very solid solo queue pickup as long as you put the time into her. At the time of making this video, win rate has climbed up to around 48%, so we wouldn't be surprised to see that jump up another 2% for 25.15, which would land her in a great spot. For now, we will be placing Ynnara in the ADC A tier, but there's a chance we bump her into S for the mid-patch tier list. Regardless of Ynnara's ranking though, definitely worth picking up right now. Build-wise for Ynnara, a lot of players are really sleeping on Kraken Slayer as a rush, and we go into detail as to why Kraken is really good on Ynnara in our ADC itemization guide that we made for her that's up on our website. It's a 10-minute video with side-by-side damage comparisons of items, so you know exactly why one build is better than the other. And it's not just Ynnara that has an item guide either, as every single ADC in the game has their own dedicated itemization video within the course. We have a few melee supports losing some durability for this patch, as Alistar is first up, and his armor is being reduced from 47 down to 40. This is a pro play skewed nerf here, as Alistar is not being picked in solo queue to much success lately, so with this nerf coming through, he's going to remain an average B tier pick. Braum is going to get nerfed for a second patch in a row, with armor dropping once again, this time going from 42 to 35. Armor growth is going down as well from 5.2 to 5. With the armor nerf last patch, Braum ended up losing a little over 0.5% win rate, so with this one coming through, we can probably expect a 0.3% drop. This then puts Braum on the fence between an A and S tier slot, so for now, we'll be leaving him in S, but there is a chance we'll have to drop him into A for the mid-patch tier list. And then for the third melee support nerf for 25.15, it's Rel, and Riot has decided to nerf her W shield, with it dropping from 25 scaling to 125 to 20 scaling to 100. This one shouldn't be all that bad, at least not enough to warrant a push down into the B tier for Rel, so we'll be leaving her placed in A. So for the support tier list, with 3 melee supports nerfed for this patch, it's going to open things up for enchanters like Melio and Nami to dominate even more. Melio is such a powerful pickup for 25.15, and if you can pair him with a strong scaling ADC like Kog'Maw, Vayne, Ynnara, or Jinx, then the mid to late game impact that you can have is absolutely incredible. To put this into perspective, Melio paired with Kog'Maw and Vayne has been winning over 55% of the time over the past patch, so that's at a level we almost never see. Now that Braum, Alistar, and Rell are weaker for 25.15, when it comes down to melee supports, Leona priority shoots up a bit. Leona has been one of the better melee supports for a while, but has just been overshadowed by Braum and Rell, so that should change moving forward. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So that's gonna wrap everything up for our 25.15 tier list update. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.